Hello and welcome to Short Convo's podcast. I am JC, Warrior of Light, Too Fast You Cashman, with good friend.
As Miralai, welcome to the show, everyone. Episode 60, I do believe.
Yes, welcome to episode 60. And for episode 60, which is actually going to be the last episode in this series, we're going to be back in September. I've always wanted to say be back in the fall. As an American fan, I don't know why, but I've always wanted to say that. So we'll be back in the fall. So what we thought, in case you've found us, discovered us, or this is the first time you've listened to us, we thought we'd do a bit of an introduction to our podcast on the last podcast of the series, because then you can go back through and you can listen to all the other podcasts. So, shall I introduce myself first, and then you can introduce you, and then I could introduce you, and you could introduce me. What about that?
It sounds all very inside out, upside down, backwards. So yeah, it sounds great. Let's do it.
So my name is JC. It's not short for anything. It's JACEY, Cashman, and I'm also known as the Warrior of Light. It's a title I go for with social media and things like that. But I suppose I'm best known in the outer reaches of the world as Too Fast You from my martial arts and competing time and career. Would you say that your activity, your business, your employment, what you do defines you as? Do you think that's for the majority of people?
That's a big question. For the sake of the intro, I would say it certainly makes up a very large portion of who you are. But I wouldn't say it necessarily defines you, but it certainly helps shape the person you are, for sure.
Well, in most cases, it's what you spend most of your time doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm a martial arts instructor. I run a full-time martial arts dojo. So that's a full-time center where we have classes 6 days a week, teaching kids as young as 3-year-olds all the way up to someone currently training in their 60s. We have a traditional martial arts, a sport martial arts, self-defense, fitness, all kind of focus. So that's what I spend the majority of my time doing, not just sitting in Lotus, meditating, but all the behind the scenes stuff of making sure the business is running. And tying into that, I'm heavily involved with competitions. I run a lot of competitions now, part of the WACO GB committee. I'm part of the WACO GB coaching staff, so travel a lot with the international kickboxing team. And we have our own Wolfpack club as well, which is part of what we do at the dojo with the competing, and I spend a lot of my time doing that. And my hobbies include, I've got a 1971 camper, so keeping that running well, and I really enjoy tinkering on that motor, and my bonsai. So I've got 3 lovely daughters, 2 dogs, and a lovely wife, and that pretty much sums me up. And as Miralai is a really good friend and also part of the martial art community family.
You got a lot going on.
Well,
when you list it all off like that, it's a lot.
As well, so I just want to sleep at the moment. It's like, but yeah, no, good.
It's a lot. I am as Miralai. That is not my birth given name. My birth given name is actually Asil, but trying to get people from the UK to pronounce that correctly, we gave up on that when I was about 9. So we switched to as soon as humanly possible. I haven't legally changed my name because I think my parents would roll over in their graves, even though they're not dead yet. They'd die and roll over in their graves if I did it. So I haven't officially changed it, but even they refer to me, and everyone does refer to me as, and that's the way I like it. So please keep that up. I also run a martial arts school. We currently run out of multiple centers as opposed to one set home as of yet. And that's my main source of income, main career. I've got a lovely wife called Anne. No kids or puppies just yet, but I'm sure all these things are to come sooner or later down the line. JC mentioned hobbies. I think me and Jay have a lot in common in that sense. It's a big reason why we do this show is we share a lot of common interests. I also enjoy looking after a few trees of the bonsai variety. I love DIY. I love tinkering with things around the house and all of that good stuff. I've also just really been enjoying being online and creating a media presence in terms of both with this content and martial art content as well in recent days. So that is us. My friend JC here. He was the best man at my wedding. He's been my coach at tournaments. He's been my mentor through a lot of things growing up. So now it's into a very nice friendship as we get into our best years, into our prime years, as we'll call them.
I like best years, definitely.
That's it. That's it.
About yourself, I would like to say, because I suppose when people listen to this podcast, it's why I had it in mind we do this is so people know who they're listening to and everything as well. You know, we could be some kind of mass murderers and they wouldn't even know, would they? But Az, you are a genuinely really nice guy, so I think you should listen to Az and all of these stuff because he's genuinely nice and he means very well for everyone. And though that said, I think that's a bit of your crutch as well, if I'm right in saying that, Az. I think sometimes you're too nice with everything that you do doesn't always help you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd definitely say that. Rather than my crutch, I'd say my strength is also my weakness.
Yeah, that's the way.
It's
that's the way,
depending on who it is. Some people certainly are aware of it and can take more advantage of it. I am aware of it, and it's something I think it's my life's project is to find the balance between being who I want to be, which is all in all a very nice person, and balancing that out so that I'm not just being walked over, as it were. I can't think of a better term to put to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
And I would say, as you're probably a little bit more cultural experience than I am, in a way that I've travelled a lot with martial arts, but within the realms of martial arts. I've done a fair bit of personal travelling, especially the States as well. But I don't have. I'm English. I'm British through and through. That's me. I'm married to she's half Scottish, but a English British lady. We're very much British people, even though I have a lot of influence from friends in Italy and again all over the world. But would you say you have a more of a diverse cult? Yeah, am I trying to put that right?
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. I think part of it's also where we live, because I'm very much in London, where it's very diverse where I am. Like my school that I went to, I was the odd one out as the white guy. So it was I was raised in actually a more black community in terms of my local area. My family's Turkish. My wife is German. I love being from the UK. I was born and raised here. I consider myself British, English, above most things, to be honest. Even I'd say I'd associate more with being English than I do with being Turkish, even though I was born Turkish. So I think I've got a bit more diversity within me, but not to say that you, like you said, don't have international friends or are unaware of other cultures and all those things. But yeah, I'd say I'm a little wider spread.
So you got more of a flavour to yourself in that sense.
Yes, olive oil.
Yeah, and then before I pass the stick to you to introduce me, I would say we're very same on many levels, like you said, the love of plants, martial arts, and everything else. But I think, am I a little bit more hippie stroke emotional might not be the right word, whereas you're a little bit more logical, ones and zeros, black and white is the difference going on here.
I think that's a fair analogy, a fair understanding of it.
Like good friends, the opposites are always drawn together.
We balance each other out in that sense. If I make you a little bit more logical, you make me a little bit more hippified.
Yeah. So there's Torch.
JC described me as being nice. If I was going to give one word to JC and tell you why you should listen to him, why if he gives you any advice on this podcast, it's probably worth listening to. The word that comes to mind is brave. He's one of the bravest people I know. He's not afraid to take a risk. He's not afraid to put himself out there. He's not afraid of criticism, and he's not afraid to not be liked in the pursuit of doing what he feels is for the greater good. So I believe him to be a very selfless man most of the time, in the sense that he is even if it might look to you or from the outside that he's doing it for himself, it's actually more often than not for the greater good, whether that be for a worldwide community, his martial art community, or his family and his friends. So if I was going to put one word on you, it would be that. That's how I would describe you, shorthand. But there's certainly a lot more to it. I'm trying to go with your frame of reference with what you said, but if not, I'll break off with it. I've known JC pretty much my entire adult life, and I remember him very much from my childhood life, although I'd say we got a lot closer as we grew older. I say after the passing of your dad, especially, we became very close friends and close in terms of business partners that we've been working together for all of that time. You've always, for me, been a source of greater wisdom than your years. So when you were 20, you knew more than most people I knew in their 20s. When you were 30, it was the same. And now at 40, you're very wise beyond your years. And I think that comes from living a life of experience rather than a life of books. So maybe you don't read as much as some people. Maybe you don't absorb as much information from the news and all the rest of it. But I think what you do is you live life and you gain life experience that in that sense, I think is far more valuable and far more utilitarian. You can actually put what you know to use a lot more often.
Well, thank you. As feels like a nice big virtual hug doing this.
It's intended. We haven't had many physical hugs in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So I think a little a virtual one. If I was to give you not a weakness, but something that maybe people would exploit, it is your hardworking nature, that sometimes you stretch yourself too thin, you push yourself a little too hard. Again, all for the greater good, all with the right motivations. But sometimes I think you can be pushed to a breaking point or pushed to a stress point, even if that's fully, you're doing it and it's almost on purpose. Sometimes I don't like to see you stretch yourself to the point that you do, even though I know you wouldn't be any other way.
I'm doing that right now with the movie, by the way.
I can see it in your eyes, to be quite honest.
Should we introduce the podcast as well? So that's ourselves. Ultimately, we are the podcast. We've had a number of guests on. I look forward to get some more guests on in the future. You should have a look back through our episodes. One in particular, Jaddy with the Black Lives Matter. That was, really topical of the time as well, even now. Roy Baker, we had my mother-in-law on as well. And so check those out. But what is our podcast as?
Well, so I think best place for us to start is why we intended to do this in the first place, like where it was born from. We don't live in the same area. So when we do meet up, if let's say it was every other week or once a month, we would tend to obviously have a very nice deep conversation. We'd have a catch up, and then that catch up would end up going down a rabbit hole of some form of discussion. And generally it was, how can we improve our lives, whether that be through our business or through our personal life. One of us would bring an experience dealing with a person, dealing with an event, and we'd share our ideas on it. And we'd share ideas of how to make that situation better. And I remember on multiple occasions, we'd finish a conversation and we'd go, oh, damn, it's a shame we never recorded this conversation because it would make for interesting listening. Then podcasts became a thing, and here we are. So I think that was the original intentions, is to start sharing our conversations, hence the name Short Convos. And we intend it to be, mostly, if it was to be one thing, was to be a personal development podcast. It's something where you can come and you can better yourselves. Not that we think we're better and we've got that to give, but that we're trying to be better, and maybe you can join us on the journey.
I know I was going to ask this to you today. Like I do reference some notes. I like to write notes and listen to our previous podcasts, and we've done referrals to that. and yeah, self development exercise and such like. But quite often it is ad lib. Like prior to this, we both said, "Oh, let's do a last of the series. Let's introduce each other." But other than that, we've got no script, and you don't edit it in a way, do you? That you frame it up. But I was trying to think about it, and I was listening to another podcast recently called and the title of it was Science of Laughter. So they were talking about why we laugh. They had a couple of comedians on, obviously, and yeah, it was really interesting. But they said one thing on there. They said how important it is to laugh. It's something that we should regularly be doing, like exercise, like eating well. And they went into why, the endorphins, but also the psychological side. And they said the same, in the same breath, they said the same goes for conversation. And they used that exact word. And they said meaningful conversation, which stimulates your mind, makes you get up and do something, or makes you make positive change, is such an important thing. So I think that's why I want to do this for myself on a selfish point of view, but also share it. It's like you said, as we don't know better than anyone else necessarily. We are experts in our own fields, but we don't know better than, sometimes we're quite often talking about stuff way out of our remit of knowledge. But I think it is a really important thing to have conversation like this.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the most dangerous things is to not, and to get so caught up in your own self-dialogue where you don't ever challenge your thoughts. You never have anything you say challenged or confronted or questioned or laughed at or joked about. I think that level of safe critique, like within friends who can be open and honest with each other, I think that's a really special thing, because like you said, it challenges you, it pushes you out of your comfort zone, and maybe it makes you think of stuff that otherwise you just wouldn't go there on your own. I think one of our most dangerous things is being alone with our minds, untethered to anyone or anything else. I think that ends up making you a bit of a recluse. And I don't think you then can serve people in whatever aspect you choose to. The biggest thing I always walk away from our conversations with is a motivation to go and do all the things that I want to do. Like I never really ever walk away from one feeling dejected or beaten down. I always come out of it feeling better than when I went in.
Yeah, ditto, 100%. I also realised the other day that I went for a walk with Bruce. Bruce is our German Shepherd, and so every day, he obviously needs a walk. I went out, and we're in the process. Well, we are actually moved home now, but it's moving everything around, stripping out wardrobe. It's all just a bit crazy at the moment with family free as well, and usual busyness of the club and business. And I realised I was walking with Bruce, and I thought, you know what, I need to put a podcast on, not our own podcast, a podcast, because I need to listen to something just to distract myself, just to focus myself. Because if I didn't, I'd walk with Bruce and I'd be thinking about all the things I've got to do, should have done, gonna need to do, and it's not productive. And in half an hour, you come back feeling worse than when you went out. But I listened to a podcast, let's say it was the Science of Laughter, had a giggle, and then by the time I come back, it was like, right, I'm motivated, I'm ready to go. So I would like, our listeners, I'd like potential listeners to use our podcast for that.
Yes, easy listening. We try not to talk on anything too heavy. We've talked big topics, but we try to keep it light, in the sense that we never come on here trying to push an agenda or trying to hammer up. I'd say the exceptions have been when we did the Black Lives Matter movement, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's pushing agenda. I think it was bringing light to a very worldwide recognized issue. And then we did the same with the David Attenborough episode, when we were talking about the issues with the planet. And we tried, I think, to give as much of a balanced view as possible on these things. We're not using this to try and, like I said, push an agenda forward. We are trying to be better people, and we are trying to bring people along with us on that journey and just be open about it, just share it. It's just going out there, we're open to ridicule and criticism on anything we say, because we put it out on an open platform. That's what you do. But I think, again, in doing that, you kind of have to question your thought process. You question the way you think about things, because you're going to put it out there for the world to listen to. And I think that's, again, an important thing, to just have that critique.
Now on episode 60, looking back, because I've not listened personally to any, I don't like the sound of my own voice, but what I have remembered is I like how we've added more features to what we do. I think it's made it a bit more light-hearted, and probably made it easier listening as well. So one of our features is a top 3. So usually Az or myself will lead with, I've got a top 3 this week, and with either just throw it out there or go bronze, silver, gold. What is your top three that we've done, Az?
The top three. Damn. I really enjoyed the gadget one that we did.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember all of our top 3s.
Well,
I one of our originals, I believe, was top 3 desserts.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that one. And then
I like the movies. We did a whole movie episode once.
We did a whole movie episode, which I think you listed your top 50 at one point, or even top 100. You got a little carried away.
We did music, didn't we, on one? And then usually in the top 3, or we actually said, we need a separate a feature for this, we'd usually talk about something food, wouldn't we? So I've never been a big lover of food, in a sense. I just eat for the sake of it, as in because I need to. I'm a real sweet tooth, so I will always look at the dessert menu first. Yourself, as you're a little bit more, well, your wife especially influenced a little bit more cuisine. Well, what's the right word here? I'm looking for.
I'm not sure what the word is, but I've worked in restaurants and I've worked in bars, and my wife works in hotels, restaurants, bars, kitchens. She's a chef. So I've had a lot more exposure to it. We spoke that, what was that episode we did, where we spoke about how you have to learn something to enjoy something. So I've had a lot more education in food, and therefore I think I can, not that I have a more appreciation for it, but I understand the finer details that might mean that I get a bit more into the idea of eating a meal, as opposed to just, like you said, eating for health or eating for sustenance to get you through.
Yeah, so I enjoy that feature. And then, we recommend different things, haven't we, a long time. So I'm my favourite podcast I listen to is Infant Monkey Cage. I'm quite often referencing things from that. And we like a rant, don't we? I think it's got to be clear. We don't have an old guy or, moan podcast, but we do like a rant where we're not trying to solve anything. We're just getting it off our chest, aren't we? So have you had any best rants so far?
Well, I think just to make that clear, that was one of the first features we had. And I think that feature came about to avoid it becoming a podcast of 2 grumpy old men moaning about the world. So instead, we kind of just put it, this will be the one rant for this episode. This will be the one moan. And we both accept that that's going to happen. My favorite rant, it definitely would have come from you. I can't remember it, but I remember you were pissed. You were really unhappy with whatever it was that you chose to rant on. I think it was the guy with the parking cone at the school drop-off. You ranted about this guy who was being a job's worth on the school drop-off.
Oh, yeah, I remember now. He was the parking cone, yeah.
He was the human parking cone. That was my favorite rant. That was a brilliant episode. I wish we had the title so I could tell people to go back and listen, but go back and listen and find the human parking cone rant, because it's a good one.
What I enjoy about our conversations the most, as like prior to this, and why we put it as a podcast and everything, is because we're talking about the bigger picture. Like we recently said, we don't like going to weddings, and one of the reasons I don't like going to weddings is the small talk. It just bores me. As a business owner, you know, you're on repeat with small talk with people. Oh, you do martial arts and everything. It's always polite, and I'm always polite. But I like meaningful. My dad used to call it soul food. We have it in our, you know, text only soul food conversation for the soul. I really enjoyed talking about the bigger picture. And this is something that came up on, again, I'm going to reference the Infinite Monkey Cage. I really love that podcast. And it came up where they were talking about humanity and where humanity is going. Are we in a good place, a bad place, and everything? And this scientist, he said, like psychology scientists, everything else, he said the one of the problems he sees we have at the moment as a race, as people, is because everything's got so fast and you know, technology and everything else, is everyone is looking out for themselves. Everyone is defining everything by a day at a time. It's like, just got to get through this day, get through this day. Politicians, they're not looking long term, they're looking how they stay in favor to stay in power and things like that, you know, on a bigger side. And I like our conversation because I think I would like to think people can see there's genuine sincerity with us, that we mean for a better good, obviously for ourselves, but we're not putting this out there just, you know. Yeah, maybe you can explain better, as.
Oh, I think you explained it really nicely. We've you know, would it be nice to make millions of pounds off this podcast? Yes. Have we made a penny off this podcast? No. But we've done it for an entire year, more than a year, I'd say, but at least an entire year. And we would have these conversations regardless. So whether we were recording them and putting them out to the world or not, we would still ring each other once a week at least and have these kind of talks. So there's no intention with this other than we thought it would be nice to share it. And if something comes of it and, you know, people enjoy it and resonate with it and stick around with us, then that's all the better. That means we can do more good with it if possible. But we really are just two monkeys with shoes trying to work our way around through this planet. That's, I think, like you said, we're trying, we don't script it. Nothing's intended. We just kind of sit down, have a chat, record it, and it is what it is. Some episodes are great. Some episodes are so-so, but we put them out all the same.
And on just a greater picture of the conversations and not just about us and the podcast, do you think that's a fair, it wasn't my representation of the world and where the human race is at the moment, but I resonated with it. Like you said, for instance, if you went back a few hundred years, everyone was so much more invested in the future. It came about because they were then talking about climate change. It was actually, the podcast I was listening to was prior to pandemic as well. So the COVID wasn't the thing, and they were saying that back a few hundred years ago, where people were building cathedrals, for instance, that took 100 years to build a cathedral. So in our lifetime, they would not see the finished thing, but they knew they were investing in it because it was for a greater good, for their worship. For, I'm not saying that necessarily religion is a good thing, but just trying to draw an example of what they meant by saying that.
Yeah, I do agree with it, and I do see it, and I think you could pin it on a whole bunch of factors. We've spoke about social media on this podcast and its effects. We've spoke about, I think a huge thing is speed. Everything's got so much faster. We can travel faster. We can build things faster. We can access information in an instant. Just before this podcast, you were having a technical difficulty, and within 2 seconds of an internet search, we had the answer. And it's like, that's a big thing now that's changed with the information age, that I guess it makes everyone a bit more independent, but also a bit more self-involved. Everyone's a bit more narcissistic, and, again, not trying to turn it into a rant about the world, but there are things, I do think we sometimes as the human race are trending in the wrong direction, even with all the best of intentions.
And so it made me think about that, and I thought, look, it's important we don't turn it into a rant and just a pessimistic view of humankind and things. So I thought, well, one of the solutions of the fixes here, which I try to leave my own personal life with, and I know you do, but having an ethical process to everything. So what you're doing, whether it's work, whether it is communication, conversation, or your day-to-day thing, is be ethical with it for humankind, just for face-to-face people, for nature and everything else.
Yeah, we both talked about the chimp paradox and how we both really enjoy that book and that it resonated with us. And for anyone who hasn't read it, a big cornerstone of that book is your life stone, which is basically the values of which you live your life around. So it's the principles of which you base all of your decisions. And it talks about this idea of, if you want the world to be a better place, you need to make sure that you make decisions that are going to facilitate that. And it helps guide you. And whether you do that via religion or your own personal code or whatever it might be that gets you there, I think that's what we have to be mindful of. And that's what we're trying to do on this podcast, is just effectively remind each other of that once a week.
So we'd always like to invite you in for the conversation. And we always like to finish with a quote. Did you bring a quote this week?
I did not bring a quote this week, but I can always pull one from the ether if it is
Put
needed.
one out, but I want you to do yours before mine, because I'd like to. I think my one can tie into a bit of conversation also about what we talk about in these conversations.
Give me one momentum. I will bring us a quote. In the meantime, Jay, why don't you tell people where they can listen to us and where they can find us?
So if you type in short convos and into any of the mediums, if that's the word, where you download your podcasts, Apple, Google, and all of those. We are Spotify. We are on YouTube, so you can obviously listen to us as a podcast. You can see our lovely faces. I'm in the dojo today, as is usually in his front room. Was it intentional to go white t-shirt today? Because usually
it was semi-intentional in the sense that I went to my drawer to get my black t-shirt out, which is normally what I would wear, and I didn't want to wear it.
Okay.
Something told me put the white one on today.
Look, I'm black today. You're white.
We have alternated.
Yeah, we changed the frequency. Yeah, you can see our face. We've got a Facebook page on YouTube. We've got a Facebook page. We've got a Twitter page. We've got an Instagram page. You don't have an Instagram page, do you? As in, it's an Instagram account. I mean, Instagram account, a Twitter account. So yeah, short convos. Find us.
I've pulled up a quote from my little note selection. I've tried to go big picture because we're kind of talking big picture. Here's a nice bit of life advice. Take wrong turns, talk to strangers, open unmarked doors. And if you see a group of people in a field, go find out what they're doing. Do things without always knowing how they'll turn out.
Love it. Love it. It's very similar to one you did a few episodes back where it was about just putting yourself out there. Yeah, I really like it.
I find those quotes resonate the most with me because I think I know that's the stuff I need to do more of. So when I read them, the little voice in my head says, yeah, go do it then. Go get on with it.
Right. My quote for the end of this series, it kind of ties in. We're in COVID at the moment. We've avoided, haven't we, talking about COVID?
We've tried.
Should we do a COVID special when it's over?
If we want 0 views, yes, we should do a COVID special.
So we've avoided talking about COVID, partly because we want the podcast not to be time relevant, I suppose, isn't it? You could listen to it at any time and it be relevant. And but the early ones, we did reference it quite a bit where we were in the stage because it was so crazy, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. But this one kind of ties in with that. But I want to explore the convo of why I said this. Things can only get better. That's my quote. Okay, to end this series, tie in with COVID, things can only get better. Now, why I chose this quote. I believe there is a higher workings and there is a higher order going on. And I get really excited with our conversations, specifically with you, but with other people, where you talk about shit that you can't explain, that is beyond the realms of ones and zeros. So as I'm listening to Infinity Monkey Cage, okay? One of the presenters is Brian Cox. You're familiar? Yeah, so he's the Astro guy that's like never aged and everything else. So he was in the band D-Ream, who had the great hit of Things Can Only Get Better. Though he didn't play on it, he was a live keyboardist or something. So yeah, I'm drawing a picture here. So I get in my camper today. This is our last podcast day, knowing that we're going to do this. I turn on my phone to connect to my Bluetooth stereo to play, and it automatically played a song from my music. Okay, my music has hundreds of thousands of songs on, so this wasn't even a playlist, it was just from the music, and it played. I didn't realize it played Things Could Only Get Better. I'm like really knackered at the moment. I've just switched to the podcast, and at the end of that podcast, like us, they ask the audience a question, and then during the show, and then they tweet in or what, however they, it's a live audience, so they write on paper or however they do it, they tweet in, and then at the end they read out, and they've got an ongoing joke because of Brian Cox being one of the presenters who never played on that song, which was D-Ream's greatest hits. Someone always makes a reference, a pun about Things Can Only Get Better. Like they might have been talking about black holes, but things can only get better. And then I suddenly realized, shit, did that song come on literally before? So I went on my phone, I went back, and it was in the Ministry of Sounds, Chill Out or whatever, and it's like, D-Ream, Things Can Only Get Better. And I tied it together, and it's like, like you're going to say it's ones and zeros. It's just by chance I listen to that podcast the most, and but the chances of that happening at that time, there's more to it than that.
That's called the algorithm, and they're always listening. And they listened in, they heard what podcasts you listened to, they checked your heart rate via your Apple Watch to see how excited you got when they mentioned it, and then they pumped that song straight through your speaker.
So this is one of my favourite parts of our conversation, because this is where we just differ so much, isn't it? we're like, I just want to believe there's some kind of veil, some kind of hippie shit going on, that someone behind the scenes, some great, not God, but energy is playing that in a beautiful way. But you can't accept that, can you, As? You've got to say that it's ones and zeros.
I have to say that it's ones and zeros. I think if you want to call yourself a man of science, which I like to call myself, not as in I'm a scientist, but I am a believer in science and in mathematics, then I cannot by all means buy into any of it. So I have to go firm on it that it's ones and zeros. But it's probably the thing I like and admire about you the most, is that you see the world through that lens, because I wish I saw the world through that lens, because it sounds so much more fun.
I think in our last episodes in particular, I was really, it wasn't a rant, but I was really stuck with my thought process on one. I brought this kind of thing up. I can't remember what it was. Someone listened to the episodes and tell us. Please comment on these, okay? Please share these. Please do that, because it helps us. Like, it's going to hurt my head now trying to remember which one it was. But I got to a place where I was really happy that I now believe what happened today. So the D-Ream, Things Can Only Get Better. What I think happened today is there is a statistical chance in this many days, this many songs, at that very moment, that song could connect So it's like thinking of someone and the phone rings and it's them.
Mhm.
Okay. I am now leaning to understanding that it can happen. You can have so many thoughts, but at that moment you have that moment, and then they call. I can draw that connection. But what I do like is to think that is beautiful. I think it is to recognize it as a great thing, and there's more to it than we can even imagine.
Well, that there you're spot on, because there we agree completely. I think that, let's say there's infinite realities with infinite JCs who infinitely play at the same time in their van. You are the one JC who got that song. So you, of all the realities you could live in a pretty beautiful one, because you live in the reality where all that stuff lined up to allow that to happen. So even if it is all ones and zeros, you have a very beautifully lined set of ones and zeros, just right to make that event occur as it did.
Yeah. As always, as I've enjoyed the convo. We look forward to getting back to our listeners with new podcasts come the fall, come September. I've just moved into a new house. So I've got some serious painting, decorating, everything else to do. I'm sure you're gonna have a good summer as well and yeah, we can see everyone. And there's 60 episodes now. That's enough to keep everyone busy, isn't it?
That's it. So yeah, if it's not clear, guys, we are going to take a pause for a few months. We're going to call this the end of season 1 of Short Convos, and we will come back in September, bigger, stronger, better than ever, and continue to provide you guys. We will let you know and update you on how the next few months go. So thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it, those of you that do, and we will see you on the next one.
Peace out.